A big welcome to the Nick Elston Show, hosted by inspirational speaker and transformational speaking coach Nick Elston. This show brings you the people who inspire, motivate, educate, and engage in all walks of life, sharing their insights and experiences honestly, unfiltered, and off script. So, without further ado, let's get stuck into today's show.
Hey everyone, a big welcome back to the Nick Elston Show, Season 4, Episode 7. And I have another amazing guest to bring you. I have the wonderful Ilona Brannen. Big round of applause.
Well, you could do that too.
Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Well done for pronunciation, Ilona. Yes, it's well.
My lovely audience know I have this massive fear and anxiety around pronunciation. So I wanted to double check I was spelling it. I was kind of pronouncing it right. I'm going to take your headline, your LinkedIn headline introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, startup consultant, business strategist, innovator, podcast host, and this is where I went wrong. I thought it said nerd in capital letters, but non-executive director, NED. Although I'm a nerd, so I'm quite happy with that too.
Yeah.
Ilona Brannen, hey, introduce yourself. Where are you from and stuff? What are you about?
Yeah, well, okay, so I am from London, and London's almost like a part of my family, so it's always a big important thing for me to say that, because it has shaped my outlook in terms of being global, international, quite innovative, dynamic, and maybe friendly and grumpy at the same time, right? So I'm kind of all of those things. What I do at the moment is, with all of those fancy titles, including nerd, is I generally like...
High five.
Yeah, high five. My passion is really helping my clients to transform their businesses with digital transformation. Like, at the heart of everything I do is this absolute fascination and passion with digital world and the analog world. And I think that comes from me being, quote unquote, an elderly millennial. So I was growing up in an analog world with a digital future. So I kind of straddle both. And so the interplay between those two dynamics is what drives me in like everything that I'm interested in, be it working with clients with digital transformation, be it helping people with coaching and looking at all the different like tools you can have online with coaching now, to like my podcast, which is all about leadership for the digital age, and how that's kind of changing and evolving as we change.
Amazing. I love that interest. And it aligns so beautifully, as if it were done intentionally. It absolutely wasn't. With my past two guests. So I have Francois Dutoy from South Africa, who was talking about using and incorporating tech into the financial space. Mm-hmm. And then we had Alex Bond-Burnett last week, a speaking coach, about how we've adopted technology over the past 2 years in terms of speaking, communicating, and that kind of stuff. But I always find it really interesting as somebody that, like you, very much the same as you, come from a time where that wasn't the mainstream way to do things. Now it absolutely is. I love what tech does. I don't get how it works. I was the head of partnerships for a software company, incorporating new technology into the legal space predominantly. Actually, a lot of the challenges weren't about the tech. The challenges were coming away from a mindset of having to do pen on paper to doing a digital technical transaction. So actually, it was kind of like a mindset shift as opposed to the actual functionality. Do you find that?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember going to a talk about this, and like, think about Microsoft Word or any Word paper program that you're typing on a laptop. We've replicated what's analog into digital. We haven't really started to explore about what's possible with collaboration tools, right? We're still collaborating on a piece of paper, even if it's just digital. And I imagine, you know, in the next iterations of the internet, like Web 3.0 and the metaverse, what delights that might unfold for us in terms of, could we actually have a 3D model, which we're all collaborating to? Is there going to be different shapes or different things we can work around and towards, instead of it just replicating what we do in an analog sense in a digital space? Because then you start to really think about what's possible in a world where you can create it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Big
sorry, I'm already dropping things. Yeah, your hat blew off there.
This hat might blow off several times during this conversation. I'm not ashamed to ask questions where I need to ask questions. I've proved that on this season already with the subjects we've covered. However, it does. Like I said, I love what tech does. I get massively confused. That's the first thing about actually implementation. I think that could be a learned skill for sure. But I think the two biggest fears that I have, being completely honest with you and everybody else, I keep forgetting this isn't a private conversation, is around delegation and automation. Both things are massively needed to improve things in my kind of business and that kind of stuff. But is that fear of letting go, I guess, of whether that be kind of through materials or whether that be through business functionality or processes or bringing in other people to train what you train. There's so many kind of different things, but the automation thing especially I find, because I've seen it done badly. And I think that's the problem. When we see things and we experience things done badly, it kind of pushes us back a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's that learned behavior. That's the way the human brain learns, right? You have a bad experience and your brain super records it, right? It really goes, that was rubbish. I need to remember that again, because that was how we survived, right? So then you're really reticent. And actually what I find with digital transformation is that's part of it, right? So working through people's fears, because I think one of the biggest challenges of digital transformation is the people, right? So you've got the implementation sort of theorists who are going, I don't want to go through that terrible show that I did before. I want, so you have to sort of calm them and show them. And the way that I help my clients to do that is by clearly communicating and managing those expectations and just setting the scene so everyone feels quite comfortable. It's very similar to when you're facilitating a workshop, right? You've got to like make everyone feel comfortable in the room. You've kind of got to do that in a more projecty planned sense, but that's kind of what you're doing. It's like, here's the rails, this is what we're doing. We'll be okay. Let's all sort of combine. And then the automation stuff, I think it has to be well designed. I know something I think that you've done really well is the way that you use your calendar to kind of automate that function of your business. And I think it's great. I was like, I need to do more of that, especially because you've got your little cap in there and stuff like that. It's just really cute. So I know it's you.
Thank heavens for the cap emoji. I'll be lost without it.
Thank goodness. Right. We should all adopt an emoji. In fact, you're probably going to need to have to speak to Unicode and go, can I have mine with a little name on it?
Exactly.
Your own little emoji.
That's really cool, actually. So tell us about the podcast that you run. And how does that help you kind of with your business and bringing people culturally on board with what you're about?
So the podcast initially started for me genuinely because I was just passionate about finding out about leadership development. I could just see that the pandemic was causing us, we're all working in a really different way immediately. And there was a huge gap in leadership capabilities to then handle remote teams, disparate teams, how to lead without like direct authority, because a lot of leadership development that I had seen and been privy to in my career had always been like in the room. Executive presence is how you show up in the room, which is great. But then how do you translate that into a digital format to then have presence where you're remote or almost virtual for the majority of your leadership? And so I started to just explore that and meander along, speaking to different people along the way. And I met you, which is great. And it's just been an amazing, yeah, exactly. No, it's lovely because I'm going to write about this soon, actually, because I realized, especially after the pandemic, I've become even more introverted. Like I was always a borderline, but I think I'm more introverted now. But actually the podcast is a great way for me to connect with like-minded people who are in kind of the same sort of industry or interests as I am in a meaningful way that introverts love. So you're getting really interesting, juicy conversations, but I'm not coming away feeling drained. I'm coming away feeling really energized and happy. And I've managed to keep extending my network, but in a really meaningful way. Like everyone I speak to, I'm like, you're great. And you've actually connected rather than like randomly trying to find the right person in a room where you don't know if you're actually going to connect properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the still loading as the name of the podcast.
Well, because you're always loading, right? It's never quite finished. It's never. Cool.
especially as a gamer. I like the reference as well. That really did float my boat. So, and I'm honoured to have been a guest on your show as well. I'll pop the link in the bio of this podcast too, and the links for every part of Ilona's life as well that she wants you to know about.
All of them. There is probably, I think there's a YouTube video from like 2000 and something of me singing live in Kyoto. If anyone manages to find that one, then let me know.
Mission accepted. So, and I'm sure Ilona would love to hear from you as well if you have any questions. So you're looking at Slate Digital, the name of your business?
Yeah. So
why Slate Digital? Tell us about the name.
I had this recently from a friend. The idea came to me because you almost like clear the slate and then become digital. And also because slate is quite a traditional material to make things with. But then you're building on top of it with the digital things. So it's got the double meaning, and it just sort of rang in my head. And I was like, that sounds all right. I'll do that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love the name. I think also because I think depending on where people are coming from, depending on where you are starting to work with your clients from, I know that when I went into self-employment, I was kind of subconsciously driven by traditional business mindset.
That's what I'm saying.
I must have letterheads, business cards, compliment slips. Not using them anymore. Anyway, I've got an explicit rating. If I need to use it, it's fine. But there were certain things I felt I had to do because I've always done it that way. And it's kind of adventurous and as kind of maverick as I thought I was being. Essentially, I wasn't. Essentially, I was just doing the same things that I've always done, just doing it for myself and not somebody else. However, on the flip side, and that's coming from kind of corporate life, if you're starting to work with somebody who has no business experience and actually maybe they need more structure and more guidance on where, so depending on where you pick up your clients and what stage they're at, you must have to take them on different journeys, right?
Yeah, so it could be where they are in their digital maturity. So some will be, a digital first company, but actually a digital first company tends to need more structure and process because everything's everywhere, but there's not been any thought to kind of where to keep either the information or to think about the process flow or the operations. Everyone's been moving really quickly and really fast to get things off the ground, but it's not necessarily scalable in that format. It's been able to be nimble and agile because it's so quick, everything in terms of the technology. Whereas if you are a client who is going to take the first step into more digital things, you can actually leapfrog, which is really cool. You don't have to go through the processes. I always think that's fascinating in terms of, like the digital revolution not being the same as the industrial revolution, because the industrial revolution had to be built on the previous ones. With digital revolution, anyone can step in, because that's one of the things I studied when I did a master's degree in international development studies. We looked at technology across the world, and I actually lived in Cuba for a while to research the internet out there. Yep, because it was the second least penetrated country on earth for the internet. What was the first, Nick, do you think?
Antarctica?
Close. It was either going to Cuba or to North Korea. So you can imagine why I got swayed with sunshine, rum, and some salsa, right? Like that kind of called me. But it's just interesting how you can kind of leapfrog, right? Lots of countries are doing that now, and it's lowered the barriers globally to like access to different things. So it really depends on the customer. And like I said, with the ones who are just stepping their toes in, it's more to advise them and to reduce any sort of anxiety they might have because it's brand new. Yeah. And the biggest thing on both sides is always getting the alignment in everybody's head about what they're trying to achieve, because then they're not going to be pulling in several different directions all at the same time, and they can actually work towards a common goal.
Yeah, so you have that clarity of a kind of a combined message to work towards. So talking about culture on professional level, you've worked for some huge organizations, as in for them. And obviously now you're flying your own kind of flag and you're doing your own thing. What the main differences do you feel that between employed life and the life that you lead now?
Well,
there are pros and cons, aren't there? Let's
Yeah. So like, for example, this like last weekend, so we're recording this during the week, but at the weekend I was filming for my marketing material for Slate Digital. So that was Saturday's job. So it had to be in my weekend because during the week I'm working with my clients, but it's also so much fun because I'm with someone that I enjoy working with. We have a great laugh. It was really lots of fun. And it's nice to make my own decisions and be like, this is what's really great. I think what's interesting is you have to increase your self-care routine and your ability to take care of yourself when it's all you, because every decision is yours. I mean, it's very difficult to outsource what it is that you're trying to achieve in your business. At the very least, you have to communicate your vision and what you're trying to achieve so that someone can help you with that. But it's constantly you thinking about the next step and the decisions. And so my sleep has to be better. I've started to go to the gym and working with a personal trainer because I need more energy to keep going. Whereas when you're employed, I think you have more stresses and strains in terms of maybe having to do things not in full alignment with yourself or having to navigate the politics in a big organization. But you do have the reduction of the decision fatigue that might slip in, and you can sort of take a bit more of a rest on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, stay on the theme of culture, but on a global level, having worked all over the world, how have you found the differences between working in different cultures compared to the UK?
Well, I mean, I came back to the UK.
But, cover that too bad then.
Yeah, no, but I think you've got to remember when you grow up in a country like of your, I grew up in London, so I'm still in London. You kind of have a little bit of a competitive advantage because you know your home ground, and it's like it's in your memories, whether you know it or not. Whereas when you're in another culture, you do always feel like a little bit of a guest, or at least I was in very different cultures. I was in Japan. Cuba was very brief, but again, very different. I lived in the Netherlands for a bit, which even though it's in Europe, is very different to the UK. And then I lived at some point in Italy. And I think it's kind of a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you know already where you live and what you're doing, and you don't have to think too hard about travel or bus passes or how to get butter. Like it took me about a week to get butter in Japan from the supermarket. I just kept going in and going, which one's butter? I don't know which one's butter. Then it means you can actually spend more time investing in your career or in a project that you're passionate about. But it's not to say it can't happen. I just think you have a little bit more of an advantage in that way. And the cultural nuances of, for example, how to do business in the UK. It's like a friend of mine was talking about. He went into the Apple store to get an Apple Watch, and they almost had like people for every single segment of the customer journey, like at the door, at the till, giving you the watch, etc. And as a British guy, he was like, I just wanted one person to just not really talk to me and give me the watch. Yeah. But they were using an American sort of customer services model where it's like, anything else? Would you like anything else? And you're like, whoa, just give me a sec. So it's those sorts of things which I think are quite interesting. But culture is more influenced, because I know you'd spoken about the size of the organizations I've worked for. So massive multinational corporations, to government, to a school. One thing's for sure, though, is that the influence of a leader is bigger the smaller the organization, but it's still influential at all levels. Like it sets the tone. Because at one school I worked at, we had a head teacher who just was, one of those like living legends, just genuinely, like you met her and you were like, okay, you could kind of understand why she had like an OBE, honorary doctorate. She was just amazing. And then the next person who came in after her, the whole like culture and feeling of the school just changed, because it would. And that's how quickly it can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So many rabbit holes to go down here. So kind of in my mind, these kind of conversations opening up. So Japan, obviously massively different culture to that of here in the UK. How long were you there, and how long did it take to kind of adapt to living in Japan?
I don't think I did, right? Because I was there for 2 years. I was there on the JET program, so the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. So you get recruited in the UK via the Japanese embassy. So when I went for my interview, yes, I was looking for a Ferrero Rocher. I did not find any. There wasn't even sushi at that point. But yeah, maybe it's only like the Swiss ambassador who has.
I just imagine the airport going, "I'm out. This wasn't part of the deal. I'm done. See you later." And then you go out there, but it's amazing the program, because you go out with a group of people from the UK who've all been recruited, and then you all get put into Tokyo for a 2-day orientation, and you've got jets from all over the world, so America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and then you're working in Japanese high schools. So one of the good things that the JET program gives you, because it had been going since the 80s, was they did 2 days in the UK and in Tokyo to help you understand what culture shock was going to be like. So you can't ever like totally prepare. It must be a bit like having a kid, right? They can tell you about it, but until you go through it, there's only so much you can understand. But they did say it was going to be like amazing, great experience, and then, oh my God, what have I done? And then it's kind of going to go up, and eventually you acclimatize, so it's not as big of a shock, I think, the longer that you're in another country. But there is always a sense of culture shock, and I guess that's what I'm talking about when I was saying, when you're growing up, you've got all these like information coming in that's just normal for you, and then when you're in another country, that sense of culture shock and just cognitive shock, because it's a new environment completely, really stimulates different parts of your brain and who you are as well. And did you get community from the other people within the plan, or were you just all kind of scattered out and you didn't really see each other too much?
We were scattered out, but we were also very, very proactive at going to visit each other. So you had almost like an inbuilt JET network, and we would regularly see each other at the weekends. And one of the, God, this makes me feel ancient, but like just remembering one of the things I did in the JET program was I was the, because I'm a super nerd, as you correctly identified in my LinkedIn profile.
I was accidentally.
Yeah, massive nerd in capital letters. I was the Kyoto Prefecture, JET representative, basically the person who made sure that the rest of the Kyoto jets were just being looked after properly.
I thought I should be like saluting or at least applauding.
No, maybe bowing, right?
Yeah.
Japan. But I helped create like an online, back in the day, like Dropbox version of Dropbox, so we could share resources and materials.
Okay.
2006. So this was just a way to share materials, so we didn't have to reinvent the English teaching wheel every single time. A repository so we could share like best practice ideas and even just connect with each other. Because Facebook was in its very, very much its infancy at that point. You didn't have everything that you do now. So it was just a great way of using whatever technology we had to share amongst, because we were disparate across the prefecture. So you've got to imagine it's a bit like southeast and southwest England, and we're all scattered everywhere. So that was sort of my first foray into how digital tools can help us do our work better and connect as well.
This show is sponsored by Forging People, Transformational Speaking Coaching. Are you truly being heard in life, in business, in education, even at home? Your ability to deliver any message with clarity, power, and emotion will have an ultimately defining impact on your success as a speaker, leader, and influencer. For more information, contact team@forgingpeople.com. Are you truly being heard? It's time to find your voice.
And it's no surprise, kind of like your passion for what you do now, it stems from a background of teaching. Was that teaching in its kind of simplest form in terms of for young adults and children as well as kind of older people?
In Japan, I taught everyone, I think. Like at one point, one of my students, she was like the age of my mum. So I think I became like a surrogate daughter. And then she was like, oh, do you want to come and see my daughter perform? And I was, I say yes to everything. I'm living abroad, right? I'm like, let's get out of the house. She's like, cool, like meet me at this place and we'll go and see my daughter. So I'm thinking, we're going to a bar and we're like, or a small place and seeing her daughter perform on stage, like down Soho or something. Ended up in some place like Wembley Stadium, and her daughter is effectively like the Britney Spears of Japan, and I'm in the box with her mum, and I'm like, what's going on? I don't, what how did this escalate? And then I could hear the Japanese like commentator going, hey, this is, Yuki, like the singer. And then they pan over to her mum, that's her mum, and this is like their like English friend, and the whole stadium was like, who? Expected me to be like somebody famous or something. And I was like, hi everyone, I'm the English teacher.
It's an amazing story. I like that.
Yeah, 20,000 people just being like, who is that foreigner?
Hi.
Anyone want English lessons? I'm here.
Exactly, yeah. You mentioned kind of like lockdown and the pandemic have maybe kind of brought out more introversion in you. How has it looked then over the past? I mean, as we're coming up, actually, the month where this will be published is in March. We're recording this in January. How have the last couple of years been for you? Because obviously, in that time, you've kind of founded and started your own business as well. So you've obviously been busy, but how has it impacted you?
Well, the life of a consultant, even though people might think it's quite glamorous, it's actually quite tough sometimes because you're traveling a lot. I mean, I know with your job, you travel a lot to clients and stuff. And especially when you're in the early stages of your career as a consultant, then you have to go on the road. That's the kind of, it's almost like going on tour. Yeah. And so I had very much the kind of lifestyle where I was out a lot of the time, at least once a month traveling overseas. And then when the pandemic hit and it was like, cool, you're now in your house all the time, not doing anything. I was like, what? And when I was doing my recording this weekend, I noticed underneath the sofa where all things go to die was something I bought at the beginning of the pandemic, which was a jigsaw mat. So it's a mat so you can put your jigsaw on, so then you don't have to fold it away. And I was like, so I bought this, shoved it under the sofa and completely forgot about it.
I was worried you were going to say something like a sausage roll then or something. It would be an extra statement.
I did find a pack of biscuits. I was like, how did they get to the back of the couch? But that's fine. But it made me realize that it could be a really good like game to play with your colleagues or whatever, or your friends, to just be like, bring in your most random lockdown purchase. So what was your most random lockdown purchase?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. A guitar. Actually, this guitar that I had every intention of learning, and I can play Amazing Grace very slowly and very badly, and that's it. I think that I've certainly heard a lot about that, actually, that people just buying stuff because it seems like a really good idea, and then it just doesn't happen. Or, I'm going to get super fit, and you just end up eating loads. And I think there's also like maybe a shame element thrown into the mix that if you don't come out of lockdown after like learning to play the violin, then you're a rubbish human being.
Right, well, this is the thing. I think as we are emerging from transitioning, shall we say, the change management term, transitioning from a pandemic to an endemic situation, I think one of the things I've learned is, don't do that again, Ilona. Like, don't overbook yourself and overschedule yourself. Rest is a vital component. I don't think I would have launched my own thing had I not had the time to be like, really, what's important to me, or really valued like the relationships in my life. So when I see my friends, I really savor being with them and experiencing that, and just really concentrating and being present in the work that I do. I think that's been, I think both of in my own life, everybody's life would be totally different, but in my own life, the extremes, I don't think I'll ever go to again. I don't think I'll always be on the road and doing what I did before. Neither will I be locked in my house, unable to leave, right? So I want to find that balance between the two so that I feel like I'm fulfilling myself and taking care of myself. Because again, as a learning sort of nut, boredom's essential for creativity, absolutely essential. And it's essential for your own I think, way of evolution, to really listen to yourself and to go, what do I want to do next, rather than always being busy and on.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the kind of inspiration? Like I said, you had a period of reflection, but the actual final kind of push over the line, what was that to launch your own thing in a time where the world was, fill in the appropriate blank there, in chaos? Was it your attempt to bring order to the chaos?
Oh, I don't think I'm as smart as that. I think it was, honestly, I just got to the point where I was like, you've sat on your butt. You can edit that bit out if you need to, but
that's fine. I do worse than that. That's cool.
But you've sat on your butt for 18 months now. If you're not going to do it now, when were you thinking of doing it? It was almost like that kind of talk to myself, because it's something I'd always wanted to do. And it's like, it's fine. Like, if it doesn't work, that's fine too. You'll learn something along the way, but stop putting it off for the right moment. There isn't a right moment. We've just discovered there are no right moments for anything, because think about how many people started a brilliant business just before the pandemic that was flying, like maybe it was a pop-up restaurant or something, like an immersive theatre experience. Like say for example, Secret Cinema. It's enormous, it's huge, the production values are gigantic now. Pandemic, boom, and they've been going for 10 years. Right. I mean, they're starting back up now, but it's just a bit like, you've got to just go for whatever it is, even if it's just a small thing. Just have a play and see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, and you're quite right. I mean, there's been obviously devastating on a personal and professional level, devastating things along the way. But I think the thing that kind of shocked me the most, actually, if I'm being completely honest, was in October of last year, when we first went back out into the world, and I think I flew up to Glasgow for an event I was speaking at. By the end of that week of being on the road all week, actually, I'd kind of forgotten all the past 18 months, all those things, like you just said, that I thought, yeah, I'm not going to travel as much and stuff. I was doing those things again, and it seemed like normal again. So it's quite scary how quickly we get used to stuff, even though we know it may not be the best for us. We get used to that kind of stuff as well. So I think that constant step back is actually one of the things I'm going to try and keep in. So even if I'm not 100% doing things the right way, at least you've got that self-awareness of. And one of the things that I certainly changed for this year is the in-person event kind of things. My own personal events is my Find Your Voice events, those kind of stuff, gone from monthly to quarterly, but actually to put more emphasis into the quarterly one, to actually make it bigger and better. And therefore you're not so reliant on that kind of that interaction too. So it's been a good step back to kind of, even as somebody who's been in self-employment now for 4, 5, 6 years, it's been a good step back to actually think, actually, if I'm going to do this, let's make sure it is on my terms, because it's so easily lost sight of, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and that's another one of the things I think I've learned from this transition from employee to self-employed to running your own business, is your ability to be a boundary ninja is really important, because you have to have boundaries with your suppliers, your subcontractors, your clients, your team, like all over the place. Whereas when you're an employer, it's just one. You're like probably like your boss and you, and maybe a couple of other colleagues, but generally like there's only a couple of boundaried relationships you must be aware of. But there's many more when you start to run your own business.
I think that's kind of the issue, isn't it? That I know, again, speaking personally, that I lost sight of what normal was in terms of that, and because the whole world had just kind of like thrown everything up in the air to see how it landed, the boundaries had to be reset in that sense. But then once you have those boundaries in place, then to communicate those boundaries to everybody else, and again, that takes courage sometimes to say, actually, these are my boundaries, and managing that expectation, because it's the expectation that causes the stress.
Yeah, and we could absolutely do more for each other and ourselves if we practice those communication skills, because they're not easy. And it's not like there was ever a class at school being like, hey everyone, come to your boundaries lesson, learn how to communicate effectively your boundaries. No, it was like Shakespeare.
Hand on heart, would I have gone? Probably not.
No,
probably something cooler to do at the time.
Well, it's a bit like when I was at school, we had oh God, what was it called? There was like some PSHE or something, where they did like random like talks about different things, like what would you do in this ethics situation? So somewhere in there could be quite useful. But it's amazing how many things we don't get taught at school, which we need to get information and educated on. So that's why it's up to you to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially when it comes to things like financial well-being as well, more on money, more on kind of entrepreneurship, and actually on the flip side of that, and it's easy for us to say as entrepreneurs, as people that run businesses, self-employed people, whatever you want to call that thing, that I think there's also a lot of shame, maybe too strong a word, but I think sometimes that we feel that if we're not doing our own thing, then we're kind of failures. And as somebody who built a career being the best second in command I could be, and that somebody that doesn't come naturally to self-employment and entrepreneurship, actually there's no shame in being the best second in command you could be, or being the best shelf stacker you can be. There's nothing wrong with that either. And I think that's also needs to be addressed. And I think maybe that's come with the influence of things like social media. I know it's a really big subject to throw in well into a podcast session, but do you know what I mean? Do you kind of get where I'm coming from, or am I just kind of having a mad ramble?
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of the place I've got to, right? Like when we were saying like what's the benefits, there are downsides, right, to doing all of it by yourself. There's pros and there's cons. And I think you just have to be honest with yourself about because you're changing daily, minute by minute, as well as the world changing around you. So whilst right at this moment, at this point where we're conversing on this podcast, it makes sense for you and I to be doing what we're doing now. In a year's time, for whatever reason, for whatever circumstance, it might be that something else is more appropriate. But it's just to take that step back, as you say, reflect and go, yeah, okay, this makes sense to me now, rather than just keep plowing through. Because I think you're right. There is a bit of a romanticism about this entrepreneurship and hustle culture. Like sometimes it's misguided. You don't need that. You don't need everybody to be, and you don't. I'm also concerned because I know this is something you are really passionate about. This pressure to always have a side hustle. Oh my God. And what about that for your mental health? And then you're constantly feeling like you're not doing enough. And like one of the things I did was I outsourced some of the things that I do to people who are better at me than doing them, so that I could focus on what I do best, and then, distribute some of that and just think about how to put my investment into my business in the right places, rather than feeling like I have to do it all myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. So when you're not doing all this work stuff, what do you love doing in your own time? How do you recharge? That kind of stuff. What do you love doing?
Well, this coincided with us being allowed out again last summer, but I was like, right, I can't sit in the house anymore, because obviously I've ignored my jigsaw puzzle. I've built a business. I need to get out of the house. So I joined a pop choir, and it is
very cool.
The best thing ever, because I get to go sing a song that's awesome, meet great people, and I don't have to prepare anything. So I go, I turn up, I sing. So even when I'm feeling like I don't want to go, and that happens, because I'll just get tired, I never regret it, never once. I never left the singing session going, you know what, that song was rubbish, I didn't want to do that. It was always like, yeah, it's great. Because apparently singing does a lot for your physical and mental health, right? So when we were back in the day, I think singing and dancing was something we all used to do around the fire, first of all, but they have actually done studies that show that it's the breathing when you're singing that does a lot to help then regulate your nervous system, to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, to reduce the anxiety you might be feeling. Then actually the physical sensation of the vocal cords, that does something with the resonance, and being in a community helps with your feeling like you're part of a social group as well.
I think that's certainly been something that's been really missed over the past couple of years, actually, is that sense of community. And as you've alluded to, it's not just the big stuff, it's the little things. That last week I met up with a few friends for breakfast, and we just chatted about absolute nothing, nonsense really, and one of them was going through some stuff, so it kind of shown him some support, and things he would have taken for granted before it just seemed more like that. And Christmas Day with the family and stuff, that it just felt better than it did before. So I think you're appreciating more the things that maybe we took for granted pre-pandemic. So maybe there's a lesson in there too.
Yeah, and I think the key, as what you've just said, is the appreciation, because now we appreciate it because we didn't have it. Yeah. The trick will be to appreciate it even when it's been around for a while, and that's just actually you taking the time and going, it might sound a bit glib, but just genuinely being like, I appreciate this. Even if you just say to it yourself. So you're recognizing it and almost saying to your brain, store this is important.
And what kind of tracks are you belting out in this pop choir then? I'm intrigued now.
So Thursday, we've got the next semester. So last semester, it should come as no surprise, was Christmas classics. Nice. So we belted out Stay Another Day, which is...
tune. Did you do the key change in the piano, still around the piano as well?
Absolutely, of course we did. One of my favourites was I Wish It Could Be Christmas by Slade. That was great. That was just basically shouting and stomping, which is fantastic. Incidentally, trying to sing Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas, You Can't Breathe. I don't know how she sings. She must have an extra lung somewhere, because we were like, I can't sing all of this song.
It's long and it's high as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so it requires a lot. But so Thursday's song is Living on a Prayer by John Bon Jovi.
Tune.
So why would you not want to go on a Thursday to sing that with your mates and then go to the pub? Isn't that the greatest combo?
I've now got to look up the nearest pop choir to Bristol. So yeah.
There is one. There is one in Bristol.
Is there?
Yeah.
They have a new hobby. Stay tuned, everyone. And I'll stick to it longer than I did the guitar, I promise. So the question that I love to ask everybody that comes on the show, and you've been prepped on this one, you've been here before. And now the MC of the O2 Arena in London, local gig for you. 20,000 people have paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you do your thing, whatever your thing is. You're kicking back in the green room, sipping a Prosecco with your feet on the table, and you hear me introduce you. Your walk-on music kicks in, that song that motivates you, that lifts you, that gets you at peak state. Ilona Brannen, what would your track be and why?
My track is Everyone's a Winner by Hot Chocolate.
This playlist is going to be amazing.
Have you got a playlist of everybody's song? Because that would be amazing to do. At
the end of this season, there will be a playlist for season 4 available through Spotify, so stay tuned. And it will be an eclectic mix. We've had trance music, we've had everything, we've had reggae, with everything in between. So we're the most motivational playlist you'll ever hear. So it's really cool. And that is going on there. Great tune. Ilona Brannen, thank you for giving up your busy time to speak with us today. Big round of applause. Woo-hoo!
Thank you, Nick. It's always a pleasure chatting to you. Thank you. And I'll invest in my cap collection for you.
Absolutely do. Yeah, I've got buckets of them here. I'll send you one.
A clean one, please.
Yeah, a clean one. Yeah, I promise. Yeah. Been an amazing episode. Really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope and I'm sure everybody else has enjoyed it too. So everyone, that's a wrap. That's it for today's show. Stay tuned for next week. Next Monday, we have another amazing guest coming your way. So please do hit like and subscribe and love and all that jazz, whatever you can do these things nowadays. And stay tuned for next Monday's show. In the meantime, take care, be happy, and stay well. See you soon, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Do hit the like button and subscribe to stay tuned for future episodes. Published every Monday and available through YouTube or the podcast platform of your choice. See you next week.